Crazy last 24, 48 hours. Today, adding another tight end. They got Jonnu Smith to agree yesterday, but today, Hunter Henry agreeing to a deal. So, Pete, they're bringing in two tight ends, trying to rekindle those old two tight end magical sets that led them to several Super Bowls in yesteryear.
Yeah, it's the Rob Gronkowski, Aaron Hernandez situation. Yeah, ideally, you'd like to have a guy who can block and play in line and still be a productive receiver. And I think in this scenario, that could be either one of these two. Although I think Jonnu Smith isn't the blocker Hunter Henry is. And, you know, when you get Hunter Henry, you play him in line. You can take Jonnu Smith and flex him out and put him in some one-on-one situations. I love the fact that you have two tight ends. I just think they might have been better off grabbing one of those tight ends and grabbing a big play receiver on the outside. They might sit here and say, hey, Nelson Aguilar is that guy. Who knows? He had one good year last year as a big play threat for the Raiders, but is that something he can do consistently? So, maybe you get Jonnu Smith and Kenny Golladay rather than Jonnu Smith and Hunter Henry. But they will be big, they will be physical, they will run the ball, and it looks like it's going to be Cam Newton doing a lot of the running and a lot of the throwing for that team, because right now they don't have another quarterback.
Yeah, very much appreciate what Pete's saying about maybe you just get one of those guys and then you get a top-flight wide receiver. At least with the two tight ends, it gives Josh McDaniels a little bit of more of an ability to open up the playbook. This is a team that in 2020, just 3% of their offensive snaps saw 2+ tight ends in the formation. The league average was around 29%. So let me repeat that. The Patriots were at 3.2%. And the league average was at 29%. They had just 1 yard per play when they had two tight ends out there. So this does open up the playbook at least a little bit for one of the best offensive minds in the game today in Josh McDaniels. And yes, if Cam Newton is your quarterback now, those two guys don't really block like Gronk and Aaron Hernandez did necessarily. I don't think either one of them is as good as the worst of those two, but you do have the ability there to be mean and nasty, especially as you get down into the red zone. If Cam Newton is your quarterback, that's going to be huge. If Cam Newton is your quarterback between the 20s, that's going to be big, because now you have guys running a lot of underneath and crossing routes, so you don't have to depend so much on Cam Newton's arm. You can depend on his decision making. But what about if you decide to go out there and get a Jimmy Garoppolo, perhaps, or you draft that quarterback? They're sitting right there at 15. I would not at all rule out the New England Patriots, as aggressive as we have seen them be so far in this free agent market. And really, these are deals for the next 2 years rather than the 3 or 4 that some of these are, at least on paper, stretched out to be. They could mortgage some of the draft to move up and get their guy if they really believe in their guy so many years after being unable to finally fulfill the successor role to Tom Brady. They thought they had it with Jimmy Garoppolo years ago. They haven't been able to figure it out since. And so maybe as we have seen a spending spree in New England unlike ever before, or at least not since 2007 for the Patriots, we see them in the draft do something that we weren't anticipating and moving up to secure their guy rather than hoping and wishing that they can do it in free agency or sit pat at 15. I can absolutely see them making a move.
These moves, and people are going to say, wow, look at Belichick. He went out and got two tight ends, the two best tight ends on the free agent market. But if you're going to applaud him and laud him for doing that, let's also criticize him because he used 2 third-round picks on 2 tight ends last year. He drafted Devin Asiasi and Dalton Keene last year in the 3rd round. Neither one of them played much at all. Now, there's talk that they could play Keene as a fullback / H-back in their offense. But again, the reason these holes are being filled is because of mistakes made by Bill Belichick. He is not above that. I mean, if you look at the wide receiver position, N'Keal Harry, they're going out and spending money to get guys, born and guys like that to fill in that role in this team because they blew their pick. So he's made some moves in the past that have been questionable, and he will continue to do so. They all make mistakes.
There's also another big name out there who might be interested in going to New England. JJ, what's the latest on Leonard Fournette?
Yeah, Leonard Fournette, he absolutely could wind up in New England, or he could run it back, of course, there in Tampa. And Tampa is obviously interested in any number of running backs over there. This is sort of It's an interesting sort of gamesmanship that we're seeing, at least between the Buccaneers and the Patriots. Oh, we're interested in your guy? Well, we're interested in your guy, is what we're seeing these two teams go about things. But listen, Pete and I absolutely share almost completely similar outlooks on the running back position. And so as we are seeing the wide receiver market be very, very cool right now, I think for the most part, we're going to see the running back market be very, very cool, because the Patriots can be interested in Leonard Fournette, even if that's a little bit of a strange pairing schematically. Okay, if they get Fournette, then they are absolutely going to be committing to just running the football. I mean, they may really go into the season with Cam Newton and be okay with Cam Newton as their quarterback if they go out and get a Leonard Fournette, because they might not throw the ball down 25 yards down the field. I think that would say a lot about what they're expecting to do moving forward. But I do think that we're still maybe a day. It's hard to say what the exact timeline is during free agency. Things can move just like that, or things can be drawn out like we're seeing right now with Kenny Golladay, for example. But I do think that there's going to be some time before we see a James White or a Leonard Fournette wind up choosing their team.
Yeah, and you know, you look at the Patriots, Sony Michel was a first-round pick, hasn't lived up to it. They have Harris, who looked good last year. Why would you sign a veteran running back like Leonard Fournette? Now, on a one-year deal, I could see that. I'm with JJ. Maybe a one-year deal, because I think Leonard Fournette showed at the end of last year that with a little bit of maturity, he could be a good player. That was the problem in Jacksonville. That was the problem early on in Tampa. I think at the end of the year, you know, maybe the pilot light went on. He realized, hey, look, I have to be a better professional, and I have to be dedicated to my craft. And look what happened. Playoff Lenny was outstanding. So maybe on a one-year deal, but I can't see New England giving him much more than that in this scenario. And you mentioned James White, JJ. What about James White to Tampa Bay? That would be an interesting one, because they need a nice back out of the backfield who can catch the football.
All right, Pete, we talked about the Jaguars earlier, and I spoke to you right before they agreed to terms with Shaquille Griffin. You said Jags fans should be disappointed in what's happened so far. I spoke to you a little bit after they agreed to terms with Griffin, and you said, well, this certainly helps. So give me a grade for Jacksonville in free agency. I know we're still very early in free agency, though a lot of the big names are off the board. A grade before the Shaq Griffin signing, a grade after the Shaq Griffin signing for the Jags, who have a ton of money to spend.
It was a C before it, maybe a B- after it. I just don't think that they've done a great job. Now, I'm not going to sit here and say you go out and spend big money when you're trying to rebuild a team, because you build through the draft. We all know that. But there are positions that are of great need on this roster, one being tight end. And you sat there and you saw Jonnu Smith and Hunter Henry, and you had the most money in the league. Go get one of them, because that was a spot that they said they wanted to fix. You know, they signed the kid from Carolina. He's a good blocker. He's not a receiver. They needed to get another big play tight end, and they don't have one. So that's a problem. I think defensively, they spent some money on guys. I think Roy Robertson-Harris is a nice signing, underrated signing. I think Rashawn Jenkins is an underrated signing, and I think Shaq Griffin gives them a nice corner because they needed corners. But I don't think there was the splash and the speed that they wanted. They signed Carlos Hyde. He's slow. Philip Dorsett's fast, coming off an injury. They didn't get faster, and to me, that's the biggest concern with this roster right now.
Yeah, I get that part. With certainly Chris Manhertz is a guy who, the tight end from Carolina, who's just going to be a blocker there. I do think that with this draft capital that they have, listen, a guy who's going to be out there who I can't imagine is going to be going back to Philadelphia is Zach Ertz. And I think that Philadelphia, right, wrong, or indifferent, and probably more right than anything, they've been holding on to Zach Ertz a little bit longer than I would feel comfortable with. But now that the two top tight ends are off the board, and we all know that Zach Ertz isn't going to be going back to Philly and they're going to be moving on with Dallas Goedert, maybe if you're the Jags, you send a little bit of that draft capital. What was all the losing for, if not to amass talent? And that would be a fantastic addition there. As far as their free agency moves, yeah, you know what, they could, and I think, Pete, you nailed it right on the head here. They could make a whole bunch of moves because they have a whole bunch of money. Well, they've had a whole bunch of money and made a whole bunch of moves in recent years, and look where that's gotten them over time. So it's okay to me that they're standing pat in some areas. I didn't mind that they held on to Cam Robinson. Would I have given them the franchise tag? No, but you have the money. Restructure Andrew Norwell, okay. I would get Trevor Lawrence a reliable target like Zach Ertz, especially where you have a trio of wide receivers that you really trust. I like that they were adding Shaquille Griffin to go ahead and put him opposite Henderson there at corner. And yeah, you start filling in other places. This linebacking free agent group is not very good, so what do you want them to do necessarily at that point? And so I'm okay with what they're doing right now, because if they were out there spending a whole bunch of money, to me, it would sort of signal, well, same old Jags.
And about 6 weeks away from the draft, when they're going to undoubtedly take Trevor Lawrence, #1 overall, to reset everything at the quarterback position for Jacksonville. Let's move on to the Denver Broncos, who have exercised their option on Von Miller. So the MVP from Super Bowl 50 is going to return for another year. But Pete, coming off injury, turning 32 this month, what does he have left?
Oh, knowing Von Miller the way I know him, he's going to go out there and play lights out. I mean, this is a guy who loves the challenge, loves to be told that he can't, and really responds to that. Remember, early in his career, Von Miller would be the first one to tell you he didn't put the work in that he needed to put in. And he, at times was out of shape and was just doing it with pure natural athletic ability. And now he puts the work in. I mean, this guy works at it like any other outside rusher in the league, and I think he's going to bounce back and have a big season. And remember, there's a new GM there, George Payton, but coach needs to win. Vic Fangio needs to win. And if you want to win, you go to your general manager, you say, look, let's bring him back for 1 year and see what he can do, see if he can still rush the passer. And I have a sneaky suspicion that Von Miller is going to play at a really high level this year for the Broncos.
I understand the Denver Broncos deciding to keep Von Miller. #1, especially after the local police out there closed whatever potential investigation that there was into him and did not file charges. We never really figured out what was going on, but it was very good for the Broncos and Von Miller that whatever it was decided before the start of free agency, before they had to make this decision on his option year. And I think that really did impact what they were going to do moving forward with Von Miller. But then #2, on the football field, or at least in the NFL world, what's also important is you look at what some of these guys, these edge rushers, made really yesterday, at least in year 1. And Von Miller right there around $18 million. That's a pretty good value if Von Miller is able to stay healthy this year, if that injury was just a one-off and he bounces back and plays like the guy that has played out his entire contract ever since being the Super Bowl MVP. And so would you rather have Von at 18 or a Trey Hendrickson at 15 plus, or a Carl Lawson, if we're just talking about 2021? So I like that. And Pete, you're absolutely right yet again. This is not a team, the Broncos, I believe, in a vacuum, if they didn't have Vic Fangio fighting for his job, this is a team that probably should tank, because I don't see them competing in the AFC West with a Drew Lock at the quarterback position. I think that they have a couple of holes on their team. I don't find them to be a very good football team, at least one that can actually compete with the Chiefs or compete with the Chargers as the Chargers continue with their arrow up. So, but you can't tank. You can't just decide to lose, because then Vic Fangio's out. And so, yeah, they may as well keep Von Miller at a price that, compared to the market, it makes a ton of sense.
If they lined up right now against the Raiders, Von Miller would be licking his chops, JJ, because the Raiders are down 4 starting offensive linemen from last season. What is John Gruden doing there at the offensive line position, which was really a strong suit for them last season?
Yeah, I don't know. It doesn't make any sense. And frankly, I've been texting with folks around the league today, and multiple executives at various teams across the league after the Rodney Hudson release happened. They're like, well, that surprised me too. And that's fascinating to hear, because a lot of times, some of these personnel guys in the league are like, yeah, I saw that one coming. Even if they maybe didn't see it coming, they'll tell you that. Well, no one saw this coming. It doesn't make very much sense. Gabe Jackson was a guy that they released several days ago, understanding that with age and his cap hit, that maybe they could bring him back at a smaller number. So I sort of understood that one. But the Rodney Hudson one today has been a stunner in the NFL world as far as stunning NFL news does go. And then, of course, Our friend Kyle Long did visit there recently. We'll see what winds up happening there. But very clearly, for whatever reason, even though we and advanced analytics groups mostly liked the Raiders' offensive line, the Raiders, for whatever reason, don't seem to like it as much as we all did.
Yeah, the Rodney Hudson move is strange. I mean, Rodney Hudson played at a high level last year. He could have easily been, the best, considered the best center in the league. That's how dominant he was. It makes no sense to me. But they do have young linemen they like. John Simpson's a guy they drafted. They think he could step in and play at one of the guard spots. But here's the thing. Denzel Good stepped in and played last year. He's a free agent. I mean, they have all kinds of issues on that offensive line. I think Simpson and Colton Miller will be fine on the left side, but that is a strange move, getting rid of a center who played at such a high level last year. There are going to be teams in that market. Can you see Kansas City maybe going back to Kansas City as their center? Or, what if Green Bay could find some money and free some money up and go after him? There's going to be a market for him. He's too good a player. This is a weird move by the Raiders.
Well, the top free agent still available is an offensive lineman, so maybe the Raiders are going to be hoping for a Trent Williams type signing if they have that kind of money. Pete, JJ, hang on. We're going to come right back with you and discuss the top free agents remaining, including the top 2 who were in Pete Prisco's original top 10. Trent Williams, now the new number 1. Kenny Golladay, still on the board. Want a sports network that delivers everything that matters about the game? The highlights, the picks, the instant analysis. No yelling, no fake debates, no politics. Hit the subscribe button and never miss a moment.